Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. How are you all doing? It is morning where I'm at. I'm not sure where it is, what time it is where you are, but I got my coffee here. And of course, I am super excited because we have another amazing talk and workshop for you guys. We have the biggest panel that we've had so far. We have some amazing devs from the SLP BCH neighborhood, and we're going to take you through a comprehensive review of the tooling for SLP. But before we jump into that, I like to get to know our speakers a little bit better, a little bit more on a human level. So I'd like to say hello to Chris and James, as well as JT, who's in the background here, but he's here. How are you all doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Beautiful day for a hackathon.
It's a beautiful day for a hackathon. I totally agree. Thank you all for being here. The first question I typically ask folks, I'm personally curious how people got into the blockchain space. Like, what was your aha moment where you're like, this is the direction that I want to go. This is the industry I want to work in. And yeah, popcorn style. Anybody that wants to jump in.
Go ahead, James.
Chris. Okay, I'll go real quick. I decided I wanted to start a software business in 2017. So I quit my full-time engineering job, and obviously had a lot of time to investigate technology at that point. Once I was starting a software company, that's when I learned about Bitcoin. At the same time, when I was creating the software company, I had a couple partners, and we're creating a shareholder list. And that's what I learned, that typically businesses put a shareholder list in an Excel spreadsheet, and everybody just trusts that the shareholder list in a spreadsheet is being maintained honestly over time. And it just kind of seemed weird to me. And then I thought, well, we have this Bitcoin blockchain stuff. Why don't we try to put a shareholder list on the blockchain where it's transparent and everybody can see the full history of the company ownership? That's when I started getting into colored coins and tokens, and decided to start working on something called SLP.
Awesome. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I was actually a very early Bitcoiner. I started mining Bitcoin with my home computer in early 2009, and I managed to actually mine a block with my home computer. That's how I got into Bitcoin, the Bitcoin space. But I left, very early. Shortly after 2013, I kind of stopped paying attention to it. And then when the Bitcoin Cache fork happened, that's what got me back into it. And I was working at Bitcoin.com when James started working on his idea for the SLP protocol. And there's a great video on YouTube where we all had a roundtable like this, and we discussed the first year of the SLP protocol and how it got started. So for anybody who is fascinated by Bitcoin history, I recommend watching that. But it's been, I've been right there with James since the initial rollout of the SLP protocol, and it's just been amazing to see this hockey stick of growth with the protocol. And it's every day I wake up excited and I check to see what happened while I was asleep, and I'm just like 100% into this space.
That's awesome. So, so you guys were both technologists, kind of. Well, you're an engineer, James, but that involves a little bit of technology, at least, right? So, but I find it interesting, like how technology met the business side of things, and that was the use case that kind of instigated things. It's always interesting. A lot of folks come from it from one of many angles, like the entrepreneurial side. They can see how the business aspect or the technology side, and it seems like you guys had a little bit of both going on there. So that's super cool. Do you guys have any advice for people that are looking to build businesses in the blockchain space? Because that's what we're doing here with Blockhack. We're supporting and inspiring people to build the future businesses. Do you have any advice for folks?
Yeah, well, my advice is just don't give up on your dream. I mean, these things, building a business takes years and years. I mean, on average, it's like 4 to 7 years or something. I mean, we're only like 2 to 3 years into what we're doing, and I feel like we're still very early. We have a lot of work to do still. We've done a lot, but we still have a lot to do, and it's just you have to have the gumption and attitude that where you stick with it and just don't give up.
That's amazing advice. Yeah. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, that's great advice. The two biggest stumbling blocks that I see people constantly struggle with is the first is you have to just accept that ignorance is the default. Nobody really understands crypto. Even the people who are deep into it, they learn new things every day. So the first thing you have to do is just get comfortable with being ignorant. Get comfortable asking stupid questions. Don't be shy about that. And the second piece of advice is ground yourself and cut through the hype. There's so much hype, and particularly for entrepreneurs in this space. They hear about something, they get excited about it, and they don't understand that it's not a mature technology. Like, it's very hard to know what's vaporware and what's actually like actionable business technology that you can put to work right now. And it's critical as an entrepreneur to understand the difference between those two.
That both two sets of really, really good advice. And I want to follow up on the like distinguishing part of like how can one really, to a greater degree of certainty, because obviously nothing's ever certain, like weed out what is vaporware versus what is an actual true project.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's easy to see. You get involved with the community that is surrounding the project, and you can very quickly see which community is just filled with a bunch of bots that are just, tipping or, and there's not really deep conversation versus going into a community chat and there's that deep conversation, getting into technical details, talking about the problems that do exist and how they're going to be overcome.
Very, very good. Yeah. Community is like what we're building here, and it's a global community. It's a decentralized community, and I love what you said there. Getting into the Telegram group, some are Discord, but finding where that community is congregating, and listening in, eavesdropping a little bit, and then maybe joining in if the waters are safe, so to speak. Yeah, right. That's some great advice there. Thank you guys so much. Okay, so we're going to jump into the talk in just a second, but for the folks that are hanging out with us in the chat, I'd like to draw your attention down to the bottom of the screen. We have an Ask a Question button. These folks are highly involved in the technology that they are building, so they would love to answer your questions, and they are welcoming you to jump in the middle of the presentation if you need anything to be clarified. So please use the Ask a Question button. If there's a question already there that you really want to get answered, go ahead and upvote that. That way we can find out what the most important questions are for you. And just beside that is the polls button. That's our chance to ask you some questions. So let's take a look here at what some of the answers are so far. So we've asked, did you know that there are stable coins on SLP? And we have a resounding 71% are saying nope, but they're going to check it out. But there's still a 28% that have been using them all the time. So that's super cool to see. Have you heard of Sideshiftai before? Again, I think it might be the same folks. The 28% are saying it's a very cool permissionless exchange, and the other folks are going to check it out. And let's see here. So this is a deeper technical question. We want to know if any of you are out there running Bitcoin Cash nodes, and if so, which nodes you're running. And we actually have some node runners here. That's very encouraging to see. We have 25% of our node runners are running BCHD, and another 25% are using Bitcoin Cash node. Nobody's using Bitcoin ABC. I'm curious as to why. But then we have some folks that are not, but they want to. And I think the saying goes, get involved in the community and run your own node. You're not a full member of the community until you're running your own node and validating your own blocks, right? Don't trust, verify. So I highly encourage everyone to run their own node. And yes, we are going to jump into the talk right now. So we are actually planning on having Joey, who you may remember from our previous workshops. He had something come up, an emergency, so our heart goes out to anyone involved in that emergency. We hope everybody's all right. And we will see Joey coming back for another talk later in the hackathon. But we wanted to just remind you of what we talked about a little bit in our previous talks, how SLP is a lightweight, plug-and-play, and low barrier of entry technology that perfectly pairs with Bitcoin Cash. With Ethereum transaction fees being as high as they've ever been, Bitcoin Cash offers a solution that guarantees that there will be low fees forever. And we're going to jump into the comprehensive tools for devs to build with SLP, and like I said, we're going to see Joey come back later on. I think it's later on this week or next week, where he's going to go deeply into NFTs, and he's going to talk about a project that he's building on SLP with NFTs. So many acronyms. He's going to talk about a project he's building on SLP with NFTs, and we're going to talk about games, collectibles, and the very interesting topic of reproductive genetics, similar to what was going on with CryptoKitties. But without any further ado, I would like to introduce Chris Troutner, JT Freeman, and James Cramer. Sorry. Chris was formerly from Bitcoin.com, and he runs the Permissionless Software Foundation and also Fullstack Cache, which is a dev suite for BCH. JT is the lead dev at SLP. He's co-founder at Fountainhead Cache, which is a suite of developer services. He's also the inventor of many SLP tools, some of which we might be talking about today. James Cramer is lead developer and co-founder of Simple Ledger Inc. He maintains the SLP edition of the Electron Cash wallet, and previously James worked as a civil engineer before becoming switching his work over to Bitcoin. So I'd like everyone to help me give a nice digital round of applause for these lovely folks as Chris takes over the cast and begins the presentation.
Yeah, let me just share my screen. Okay, can you guys, let's see, there we go.
Yeah, looking good.
Okay, cool. So before I jump into Fullstack Cache and the Permissionless Software Foundation, I want to introduce people to some of the SLP token exchanges and stablecoins that exist. So this is Sideshiftai. If you've ever heard of I forgot the one with the fox. But anyways, this is a permissionless exchange, non-KYC, but if you're accessing it from the US and I think Canada as well, you'll get blocked. So you can still look at the web page, but you can't actually do an exchange. So you'll need to use a VPN to get around the geofencing. But what I like about Sideshift is that it's non-KYC, so you don't have to sign up or give up any identifying information. You can just log in, do an exchange, and you can shift between all different kinds of cryptocurrencies, BTC, Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, several others, Monero. And they've got two SLP stablecoins listed, USDH by HonestCoin and USDT by Tether. And the important thing to keep in mind with any stablecoin, other than DAI, there is a centralized organization behind it, so it's not decentralized, but it is a nice tool for escaping volatility. I'll just leave it there. Hopefully people are familiar with the concept of stablecoins. I just wanted to point out that there are two that exist using the SLP tokens, and that's kind of a good segue into the Permissionless Software Foundation, which I founded a few months ago. It's a small community of JavaScript developers who are focused on Bitcoin Cash and SLP tokens. And it's not a stable coin, but what it is it's the SLP token is loosely pegged to Bitcoin Cash. And so it's highly experimental. I need to point out right from the get-go, this is not an investment. You may very well lose all your money if you buy these tokens. So I'm not encouraging people to go out and buy these tokens. I'm just exploring this. This is a software experiment, and it really is truly an experiment. But currently the token is sitting at roughly around 17 cents per token. And it's a loose peg, so it slides up and down. And what this allows is for the community members who want to see things built in the Bitcoin Cash space, they can buy tokens to essentially fund the developers that then go out and actually build the things that they want. And so there's this feedback mechanism between people with money and people who have the skills to build the things that the people with money want. So it's an experiment our slogan is open source incentivized with tokens. And so what it is it's essentially a governance token. And every quarter we have these grants, these bounties, and we just did our token airdrop for the token holders, and they essentially cast their voting token to signal what people and projects they want to see funded. So like for instance, Daniel, he's kind of one of our lead developers. He's based in Venezuela. And so the money that he makes by developing software has just been a boon and a lifeline to him. And he lives comfortably in a place with a broken economy because he uses Bitcoin Cash to escape that economy. And so this is me right here. But you can check this out at psfoundation.cash. There's a lot here. I'm not going to go too into depth. There's a video here that you can watch. But it's an interesting idea. This idea is based on the Bancor white paper, which is an Ethereum-based sort of token exchange. So it's based on their idea of doing things. I read their white paper and I took that tech and adapted it to the Bitcoin Cash and SLP token space. But it essentially runs on the same idea. If you want to experiment with it, if you got Badger Wallet extension installed, you can click these buttons and buy and sell 10 cents worth of PSF tokens. Or if you have a SLP token aware wallet, you can scan one of these QR codes. Do not put large amounts of money in here. This is just an experiment. I encourage you to play with it, but don't take it too seriously. So anyways, that's the Permissionless Software Foundation. We have a range of products that we're developing, and the flagship product is Fullstack Cache. And this is the Bitcoin Cash blockchain as a service. Briefly, let me talk about how the Fullstack Cache is based on this concept called the cache stack. So if I think most of the people in here are developers, so I'm going to use some developer terms. So you've probably heard of like the mean stack or the lamp stack. And so in software, this concept of a stack of software is very helpful because you can break more complex problems down into smaller problems by looking at them in a stack. You can ask like, okay, where in the stack does the problem lie? Where in the stack are we trying to like solve a problem? And so the cache stack has a full node at the bottom, which is the most basic blockchain based, piece of software. There's a lot of support software, and then at the top of the stack is that block that says your app. And so what this is it's an attempt to help businesses very quickly start using cryptocurrency in their businesses, SLP tokens and Bitcoin Cash, and by abstracting a lot of the technical stuff away. And so what Fullstack Cache does is it offers everything below that first block as an online service, as a REST API or a JavaScript library, so that people can get started building applications for their business without needing to know, all the minutia that goes into cryptocurrency. They can just get started. And so one example of that app is the wallet.fullstack.cache. This is first of all, I want to draw your attention to the big red sign that says Open Alpha. This is it's not mature software. We're building it out. It's getting good, but things are still changing. But what this is, it's a web wallet. So any device that can access a web browser, be it a desktop or a phone or a refrigerator or a Tesla, can transact in Bitcoin Cash and SLP tokens. So this web wallet, it supports sending and receiving Bitcoin Cash, sending and receiving SLP tokens, including NFTs. So this is the only web wallet that I know of that can fully support non-fungible tokens. It's also got a sweeping feature, so you can store Bitcoin Cash and SLP tokens on a paper wallet and then sweep them safely off of the paper wallet. And that makes sharing both Bitcoin Cash and SLP tokens with newbies and with non-crypto people very easily, because you can put it on a paper wallet, hand it to them. They don't need to know anything about it. There's no batteries required, nothing to download. It invites them to learn more about this technology at their own pace. And so I've found that's a great way to onboard people into this space. So yeah, play with it. Again, an experiment. Don't take it too seriously. Do not put very much money on this thing, but please do experiment with it and play with it. To shift back to the cache stack and fullstack.cache, if anybody out there does end up looking at this and playing with it, scroll down about halfway. There's an examples page with videos and example code to get you started quickly. There's documentation page that has all the documentation for all of our APIs and libraries. And then there's a link here to the Telegram channel. So if you need technical support, that's the place to go to ask questions. And let's see. And so to go back to the cache stack, so I've talked about the app, and if you're a front-end developer, that's pretty much all you need to know to get going, and for businesses to start building onto it. Everything in this stack, including the web wallet that I just showed, is 100% open source. Everything's on GitHub, and it's all MIT licensed. So that means you don't have to ask us permission for anything. You can take it, modify it, white label it, do whatever you want, make money off of it. You don't owe us anything. It's all here as free resources just to help bootstrap this industry and help businesses get started in it as quickly and easily as possible. But let me take a minute to talk about the lower half of this stack. So the colored area, the lower half that's with the REST API at the top and the full node at the bottom, what we do is we provide a REST API. And so if you ever go to like Twitter or YouTube, you'll notice like really quickly in the first like second, it's just a blank page with a bunch of boxes. And then very quickly, those boxes start getting filled in with content, which is customized to your user account. And that's an example of a REST API where this is typically how the modern internet works today, where it loads a blank page, it loads very quickly, and then it uses a REST API to start querying and doing kind of a lazy load of the actual content. And so we took that same idea where we took the full node and the ElectrumX indexer, and there's also another indexer called Blockbook, and there's the SLPDB database that I'm sure the other guys are going to talk to. And we wrap that in a REST API. So all you really need to know is one set of documentation, how to interact with the REST API in order to interact with all this lower level software. And it's a great level of great abstraction. It's a great way to make it easier and approachable for businesses to start just building apps that interact with Bitcoin Cash and SLP tokens. But our intention is not to create a walled garden. If anybody out there has the time and the skill set and the patience to learn about this technology, they do not need to pay Fullstack.cache for anything. We have this page called the Cache Strap page. You can get to it from the main menu by clicking on Cache Strap. It's kind of hidden because not very many people are going to be interested in this, but since there's a lot of developers here, I thought I'd talk about it. But this runs I'm going to be adding a BCHN node here. We've got a Bitcoin ABC node. We've got the Blockbook indexer, the Fulcrum indexer, which is the ElectrumX indexer, and SLPDB. On this page, we've got pre-synced databases and Docker containers. And so you can download everything really quickly and get started with your own infrastructure so that you're not reliant on Fullstack.cache if that's what you want. We want to encourage everyone to be as decentralized as possible. The only thing we ask is that these precinct databases, they're distributed over BitTorrent. And so we encourage people to help seed the databases and help us distribute these databases for people. That's a great way to give back to the community. Yeah, so I think that is a pretty good summary of Fullstack.cache and the Permissionless Software Foundation. I really encourage businesses to look it over and reach out on our Telegram channel if you need help. We're all about partnering with businesses and developers and helping them get started. All we really want to see is more growth, more people coming in here, more businesses using it. That's why I was showing Sideshiftai. I'm really encouraged that we've got some stable coins in this area. I want to see more stable coins. I'd like to see more people do interesting things like what we're doing with the Permissionless Software Foundation by creating an SLP token that's pegged to Bitcoin Cash. That's not a stable coin, but it's kind of like in that it is backed by the Bitcoin Cash. So it's I don't even know what you would call that, but it's an interesting idea. And it borrows from some interesting ideas from the Ethereum world. And so I'm all about finding more innovation and growing the number of developers in this space. I maintain a couple Telegram channels where I help developers and entrepreneurs commingle and find one another. So if you reach out to us on the Telegram channel, again, which is at fullstack.cache, scroll down where it says community, click on that button, and that'll take you to the Telegram channel. Let me get back here. And is there any questions with regard to the Permissionless Software Foundation or Fullstack.cache? Not seeing any, but I'll give it a minute. And I'm just pulling up the agenda to make sure that I hit everything. The REST API. Yeah, I went through that a little fast. I think I'm going to hand this off to either JT or James to continue their part of the presentation. Oh, if you can, tell us more about the PSF token. Yeah, okay. So the Permissionless Software Foundation is an attempt to create the first DAO, or decentralized autonomous organization. There's several that exist on Ethereum, but we're attempting to be the first one on Bitcoin Cash. And obviously, Bitcoin Cash doesn't have the expressivity that the Solidity and Ethereum has, but so there's definitely a manual side to this. It's not completely automated, but what we do use is multi-signature wallets, and so that there's no central point of failure in the organization. So that's really like the big thing that we're trying to achieve. And really, it was born from this idea of funding infrastructure and how do we do it. And there's some thought leaders in the space that I follow, Nadia Ekbal and Mikhail Rogers, both of which have made a career in understanding open source communities. And they've written, Nadia in particular, published a book recently called Working in Public, which was a great body of research on how to organize open source communities. And so we're taking a lot of lessons from that. But in its bare essence, it's really just trying to create business-centric software that's open source and create this positive feedback loop between the people who need and want to use the software and the developers who can create the software. And so far, we're doing pretty good. The token's up at 17 cents. That's a pretty big win. It peaked at 50 cents. And then came back down, and that was expected. And that's really the idea in a nutshell. not everything that we're doing is going to work. I mean, we're definitely trying to approach this from a place of humility, and be obvious that it's an experiment, and that we're just trying new things and seeing what works here. But I'm really excited about the software that we're developing. We've got Fullstack Cache, which I presented. We're also working on end-to-end encrypted messaging and file sharing using a combination of Bitcoin Cache and the interplanetary file system. We're also working on a community feed that is uncensorable, but at the same time has moderation, where we're exploring this idea of merit, where a person who holds SLP tokens, you can calculate both the quantity of tokens they hold at an address, but also the coin age, the age of those coins. And then when you multiply those two numbers together, you get what I call merit. And what's unique is anybody who's familiar with this concept of Sybil attacks, of like people just representing themselves hundreds of times because it doesn't cost anything to represent yourself. You need some sort of scarce asset to fight that Sybil attack. And in Bitcoin, that is proof of work. And in other cryptocurrencies, that's proof of stake. These are all different ways of overcoming the Sybil attack. And one thing that hasn't been greatly explored is this idea of coin age. And so by combining both the quantity of the tokens, which is a scarce asset, and the age of the tokens, which is another scarce asset, but you can't just buy coin age. You can multiply those two numbers together and get what I call merit, and it's a very easy way to sort people. And in our community feed, we can dial up the merit. If it gets too noisy or too spammy, we can just dial up the merit required for your post to show up. And so it's a really interesting way of spam prevention. Another thing that we're playing with is a new coin join protocol that we're calling consolidating coin join. And I'm excited by it because the end result is it creates large anonymous coins, and there's no central server required for coordination. So if you're noticing a theme here, that we're playing with a lot of risque technologies, end-to-end encryption, token exchanges, and coin join. Like these are software projects that no business in the world would ever take on because they're too risky. But because we're a DAO and there's no central point of failure, we can take on these projects. And so that's really like the essence of the Permissionless Software Foundation. Is we're focused on the gray market, promoting Bitcoin Cash, promoting open source. Those three things, the intersection of those three things is what we're really focused on. And I think it's a unique niche that other like conventional businesses can't compete on. And we need something like a DAO to experiment and push forward the technology in these areas.
That's awesome. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not seeing any more questions.
Yeah. I will. I'll definitely jump in if I see any questions come up. But I think we could move on to the next section.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. That was a really good introduction. And yeah, everyone should go and check out some of the tooling. A lot of it's really easy to use and super well documented. So it's a big help.
Thank you.
Let me just get my screen share set up here.
So for everyone on the cast, this is JT Freeman. He's going to be taking over and doing the next section of our workshop here. He's just getting his slides set up.
Yeah, so I'm JT. I set up, co-founded Fountainhead Cache, which has a lot of developer tooling. You go and check it out. It's all free to use. There's a bunch of different services, so you don't have to set up and sync any of the stuff yourself. It's really good just for testing and sort of getting started with these sorts of projects before you transition to something that's hosted. But there are a few companies that are using these services as well, just as is. So yeah, I wanted to talk about the different SLP tooling and some of my favorite tools and libraries and projects that are going on. The first one that I really want to talk about is SLP Lite. So me and Andreas from Bitcoin.com worked on this together. It's one of the problems that we saw was that it was sort of ironically difficult to make SLP transactions sometimes, and which is funny because it should be the simplest thing. Like it's pretty straightforward, but yeah. So we collaborated to make this this library that can pretty much handle everything for you, and allows you to provide different backends. You can customize it a bunch. And so we're going to be adding BCHD support as that comes out. But right now you can use it. I'll show a little example. So this is what it looks like to actually send. And for most projects, really, I think most token projects you're really only going to be using, well, the majority are going to be pretty basic functionality. So you're going to be sending or checking if you have incoming transactions and that sort of thing. So if you look here, you can see it's just a few lines. So there's the WIF, which stands for wallet interchange format. So if you're using a library like Bitcore, it's like 2 lines of code to generate this, or you can extract it from Electron Cache. And this is just your private key to address. That should be pretty obvious. The token ID that you're sending, and then the amount of tokens that you are going to be sending. So yeah, it's super simple. And what's cool is actually the simple send function. You can look in the code for it. Let's see. This is all. And yeah, it's built so you can make your own sorts of functions like this that take some of the underlying UTXO management and that sort of thing and perform different functions. So even if you look at this, it's not a bunch of lines of code. So yeah, I think if you're just starting with a SLP project, this is a really good way to get started to programmatically send SLP transactions. So what that's built on, and if you want to go a little bit lower level or understand how that works better, or maybe you're doing more advanced sorts of transactions, there's a library called Metadata Maker, and this is a lower level library that generates the op return data for SLP. So it provides a high level interface to a low level operation. And so you can see here again, there's a big focus on trying to keep it, very simple. There's only a few lines of code, and this is we're putting in a token ID, and we're probably for this transaction we're sending 10 tokens, and we're sending 990 back to yourself as change. So this would be the first output in a Bitcoin transaction. So that's one of the rules for SLP. The first output must be the op return that encodes the coloring for SLP transactions. So this is sort of the inverse of that. You can take the these op return data segments and use SLP parser to hydrate and get this this object. And this is actually like a buffer, and these are big numbers, but I just made it a little bit easier to read. So this will work with any of the SLP transaction types. Yeah, so you might use this if you're working on something that is trying to add visualization to a transaction or some sort of wallet or something along those lines. So I want to show one tool that I think a lot of people haven't really seen much of. This is called SLP Decoder, and this is part of the Graph Search project, which I made probably about a year ago. And so the origins for that was trying to build a backend for Electron Cache SLP that could trustlessly validate tokens or provide proofs. You probably don't have to worry about that too much, but there's a handful of tools, and this is almost the same as the parser before, right? So you can toss in this op return data, and yeah, it'll print something out. And what's cool about this is, say you are looking at a transaction that someone else made, and it's, you know, Explorer showing it's not SLP. And you're like, man, you know, what's actually wrong with this? Or, you know, trying to look through this and figure out, you know, what the issue is, isn't the most fun. So this will actually, I just made some modification to that previous data for this, and it'll show you, you know, the error message. This is pointing to the line in the parser. So if the error message maybe isn't clear, it should be clear enough from reading the code. And so you can go through, and if you see a SLP transaction that's, you know, not being picked up, this would be a good way to figure that out and debug it. So if you're using, you know, Metadata Maker or one of the other tooling options, this really shouldn't happen. But if you are trying to debug other people's transactions, it's super useful if they're using other tooling. So similarly,
JT, real quick, is that Decoder, is that an NPM library, or how does one get access to that?
Yeah, it's not NPM. It's a C++ project. So it uses CMake. So yeah, this is the URL to check it out. It's under Blockparty SH, C++ SLP Graph Search. And then if you go through and build this, you'll end up with with that tool. So there's not pre-built binaries, but it's pretty straightforward to build. It's only a few lines, so I guess the biggest thing is installing gRPC. But yeah, so you don't have to sync this or anything to do like the decoding stuff. But yeah, likewise, there's a whole transaction decoder. So I think this is probably more useful for general usage. You can see here, I just showed, you know, maybe how you would do it. You can hit Bitcoin, grab a, you know, the raw transaction hex, and then just run TX decoder with this data. And what it'll do is, it's sort of like SLP decoder, but it'll show you the full inputs and outputs and the SLP amount. So one thing, so the 0th output, that's, you know, the first output, since that's op return, and you can actually see the op return right here, that is going to have a value of 0 for SLP, because it's not something that's spendable. It's just metadata. And then likewise, you can see it for the other values here. So this is super, super useful when you're checking out different transactions. It's like, I mean, yeah, you can use an Explorer, but it's, I don't know, this is a lot easier just to get the data right away on sort of a lower level to see, you know, what you're actually working with. So yeah, it'll include any of the, for the different transaction types, it'll include any of the different parameters. So for Genesis, this would have like the name and symbol and that sort of thing associated with it. So yeah, that goes to Graph Search ++, which both of those are part of the project. So this is built, like I said, for helping with wallets. It provides a really fast validator and indexer for SLP transactions. It's a lot simpler than projects like SLPDB in the sense that, you know, it only provides a few different endpoints that you can get data from. But because of that, you can really really hammer it with a bunch of stuff, and it's super well optimized for what it does. And so there's a a few cool things with it, right? So it's pretty easy to add on custom objects. I don't have an example of this as a slide, but one of the things that I added was doing like signed validity messages, so like an oracle of SLP validity. And yeah, it's super easy to add that into this. Is, you know, like just adding a new route. And yeah, there's a few other kind of cool stuff that you can do. There's a command line interface, and you can generate graphs and stuff like that. So yeah, there's actually a front end web interface that you can see. So if you go to that URL, this doesn't have everything that the CLI has, but yeah, it has a handful of different routes they can sort of see. So trusted validation. Normally, you wouldn't want to use use this on its own with a third-party server, because you're just trusting that server. It's not trustless, but this is, you know, the faster way to do it. Or if you're running your own, that's fine. The output oracle, that's what I was just describing before. So you can pass in a output, and it'll respond with a signed message that there's a special encoding for these, and you can do kind of cool stuff with cache script or spend or other Bitcoin scripting that utilizes this, and it'll check the signature, so you have some sort of idea that's a valid output. So I guess that's one point to sort of cover with this too, if it's not already clear, because SLP is not it's not miner validated. Some of the things that you have to do with it might be different than what you're used to with Ethereum or other projects. So for example, the graph search route for this, really you'd never use something similar to this with anything that's miner validated. But what this does is it provides a proof, so you can check the validity of an SLP transaction, and there's no way for the server to actually lie about this proof. So it's kind of a cool construction. You can validate the entire thing and be sure that what it's telling you is actually true, and there's no trust involved. So yeah, probably that's some of the more of the stuff for building transactions. But another thing that yeah, I guess probably the other side to that is really looking up, you know, we've made these transactions, like how do you get any data from these, right? How do you look stuff up? How do you do statistics? How do you just get information on tokens in general, right? Like, how is an explorer made? Or if you have some application, how do you see that you know, this person sent this amount of tokens to this address? So SLPDB is a project which solves this. It looks at every single SLP transaction, or really every Bitcoin transaction, and builds this MongoDB database that you can do all of these sorts of crazy queries on. So this, I can go over, this is for counting the total minted tokens. So when you create a token, you do a genesis transaction that will generally create some amount of tokens and send them somewhere. And you can also create a minting baton and send that somewhere. And that would allow for future creation of more tokens. So with this, you can actually use MongoDB, MongoDB's aggregation pipeline to count the total number. So what's happening here is there's a pipeline. So there's multiple different steps. Like, this is the first step, second step, third step. The first step is just looking for any of the transactions that include a genesis or mint output, and it has a certain token ID. And then we're using the unwind operator, and this will explode the outputs from each of these transactions. So if you had, say just one transaction with 3 outputs and one of them is genesis, you'd now end up with 3 different rows that you can work on for this. And then we are going to add up the SLP amounts from each of these. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. You can do all sorts of crazy stuff. And we have tons of examples. Actually, I don't have the link up, but I can pull it up real quick. So yeah, we have tons of examples for all of the different stuff. Well, not all of the different stuff, but hopefully it gives you some inspiration. And a lot of these were actually, I actually extracted out from the Simple Ledger Explorer. So this whole Explorer is built using SLPDB. So it's and this is all open source as well. So that's a good way, but some of the more interesting ones from these I pulled out. I can go over sort of some of the tips and tricks with SLPDB querying. So this looks kind of funny at first glance, but I can break it down a little bit. So what we're doing here is we're creating a function that will retry grabbing data. Just because of the nature of third-party network services, you probably want something like this, just in case something goes wrong. On your first request, this should be able to grab it unless that server's actually down. We have to, for these queries, we are actually just hitting this SLPDB endpoint, and we are converting our query, which is just that JSON that I showed before. We're converting that with to a string, a JSON string, and then we're applying BTOA, which does base 64. So this is a way to do it that will handle Unicode as well. And then yeah, we're this query function that we're going to be using. We're just doing this fetch. I'm sure you guys who've done some JavaScript have seen this pattern before. Check if there's any sort of error, and then return the data, which is all going to just be more JSON. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see some super simple examples, and how I like to use SLPDB is I provide these little functions which take a few parameters and will pass it into a query function that will do all of this stuff with retries and converting everything. So this way it's pretty clean. You can specify the database. So there's T, which stands for token, and G for graph. And there's a few others, but those are going to be generally what you use. And yeah, if you're not familiar with MongoDB, or if a lot of the stuff just looks like why is there a limit here? I really recommend just checking out the MongoDB documentation. It's super easy to sort of see how all of this stuff actually ties together. So there's some stuff that's not MongoDB, like selecting the database, but find and sort and limit and skip, and all of this stuff is a one-to-one mapping. So it should be pretty easy to tell, and especially going through these examples. So This is another project, and this is so there's actually two that do pretty similar things, and they have different backends. One is SLPSocket, which connects to an SLPDB server, and this is SLP Stream, which I like because I think it's a little bit faster, and the SLPSocket has and this have slightly different semantics that are pretty minor, but it's one of those things where it's hard to update a project without breaking it for everyone that's used it before. So I think this has a few minor things that are a little bit improved that just weren't able to be done without breaking backwards compatibility otherwise. And that has to do with how do we represent tokens? Do we show them in their base units, or do we show them as strings, or how do we do it? And that sort of stuff, right? So it's pretty tiny. But what this is it works really similarly to SLPDB, but you're actually opening a server-side event stream. So it's this persistent open HTTP connection, and it'll stream you new transactions that match your filter. So your queries for this are going to be generally a lot simpler than SLPDB. The concept of like doing a pipeline doesn't really make sense for this sort of stuff. But you can use it for kind of interesting things, right? Like you can, the simplest and probably most common and useful is just saying, hey, did this person send this token, or did this token move at all, or something like that. But you can apply multiple rules where it's like, hey, I need this token to be moved in this amount, to this output, and this amount to this output, or something like that. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool because instead of just having a regular API endpoint, and similarly with SLPDB, you can just make your own API endpoints pretty easily, right? There's I think going through the examples and looking at a few of them, even if you have no idea with MongoDB, it should be pretty easy to cobble together something that works, or maybe someone's already done it.
So we got a question here.
Yep.
If I can jump in.
Yeah, I was just about wrapped up anyways. So
nice. Good timing. Is there anything you wanted to say before you jump into questions in that case?
No, let's jump into questions.
Okay, cool. So a question from the audience says, does GS++ build its own index, or does it do graph search directly on the blockchain?
So it builds its own index. It's a in-memory index, and it's really optimized around being quick. It doesn't take a ton of RAM, but longer term, it will use more RAM than other options. But I think we have quite a few years before that's really a problem. So,
cool. Any other questions from the audience before we go to the next segment? Cool. I think we can move on. We got a ton of links on the side panel for folks that want to follow up. Oh, I did see a question pop up. To counter Sybil attacks, is it plausible to hash fingerprint pattern or anything organically unique? Yeah, I mean, might not be directly related to what we were talking about, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I don't understand the context. So
yeah, I think it's a general.
Yeah, I mean, I can give my thoughts on Sybil attacks. Like, yeah, I don't think doing something that's just something that's purely unique isn't very interesting. You need to add something that makes creating that uniqueness cost something. So this is like a perfect example for where a proof of work sort of system or a hash cache style spam preventer might help. And there's a few other things too. So I think even even with that, that's kind of a hard problem because people can come out with ASICs that outperform whatever, and maybe that's not a realistic problem for some custom algorithm, but I guess theoretically it is. So one of the things I think is probably going to become more and more important as time goes on is building out web of trust networks and other methods that don't necessarily rely on captchas or that sort of thing, but actually deal with person-to-person trust levels and scores, and I think longer term that's really the only realistic option for dealing with these sorts of problems.
Very interesting. Are there any projects in the BCH space, SLP space that are doing Web of Trust?
I'm sure there is, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Fair enough.
Yeah, this is Chris. I occasionally will see a project around Web of Trust pop up here and there, but I haven't seen anything like significant that's withstood like a significant period of time. But just to circle back around and underscore what JT said about the general approach to a Sybil attack or to solving a Sybil attack is scarcity, not uniqueness. So you need something that is scarce. So that could be money. It could also be reputation. Reputation is scarce, like with Web of Trust. Or this is why I've gravitated towards Coinage, because it's scarce, but it's not scarce in the same way that money is scarce, where you can just like acquire money. Like there's no way to buy age, and just like there's no way to buy reputation, which is why Web of Trust is so attractive as a possible solution.
Well, I wouldn't say there's no way. It's just much more expensive, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's scarcity is the solution to Sybil attacks, and scarcity often translates into expense, but not always.
Interesting topic. I love it.
We should do a whole workshop on that topic someday. That'd be a really fun thing to explore more.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, that's everything from me. So I'll pass it off to you, James.
Awesome. Thanks so much, JT.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Hearing you loud and clear.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And just let me know that you can see my screen, please.
Looks good.
All right. Thanks. Okay. So thanks for the introduction, guys. For the last few months, I've been working on an SLP indexer that's been built into the BCHD full node. And it's integral to the full node. It provides a fast gRPC API. It provides burn protection for tokens. There's an HTTP API and also a built-in Swagger UI. So maybe not everybody here has run a full node, but there's a few reasons why you might want to consider doing so. The first would be trust. So SLP is unique in that if you trust a third-party service about the validity of your tokens, that third party can lie to you about the validity, and it can lead to burning of the tokens. And also wallet bugs can lead to token burning. So it's important to understand that you should either locally validate your tokens or trust the full node that you're connected to, or trust the SLP indexer that you're connected to. The other thing is privacy. When you connect to third-party APIs, you're giving away your IP address, which will can be associated with your blockchain history that you used for your wallet or your application. The third reason is performance. So if you're going to be doing local validation of tokens, it can be very slow. Using a trusted full node will make that almost instant. Also, public APIs are often rate limited, so your wallet or application might be limited by these limits that are put in place by the public APIs. So why run BCHD full node? Well, it's simple deployment, and it eliminates this idea of a software stack. I mean, you pretty much just run a single piece of software, and you get a transaction index, an address index, and the SLP index. And this comes with the gRPC server or an HTTP server. I also want to point out that the BCHD SLP indexer is the fastest and most feature-rich SLP indexer available. So just some general features about the BCHD SLP. It's a very efficient SLP indexer. It takes around 20 minutes to index it. I haven't timed it exactly, but it goes pretty quickly. It's less than 30 minutes. The storage requirements on disk for the SLP indexer part of it is less than 400 megabytes. If you compare that to SLPDB, you're into the 4 gigabyte range. Now, it might be less than that if we just talked about the validation component. So gRPC API is extremely fast. There's, like I said earlier, if you don't have, if your application can't connect to gRPC, which is an HTTP2 protocol, there is a HTTP gateway available, and it has a Swagger UI, which I'll show you here in a bit. The other great thing about BCHD is it has a protobuf file for the RPC interface. So this means that you can compile an RPC client in pretty much any software language. Protobuf is by Google, and it's extremely interoperable between almost all languages. So currently we have a Node.js, a web, and also a Dart, a gRPC client available. And I'll share the links to those repositories later. There's also a PHP client available, but this is using the HTTP gateway. So the BCHD indexer uses a new SLP library, which we're calling Go SLP. The library is written in Golang. So we've completed the unit testing. We've done a differential fuzzer testing with the parser. So then the innovative features with the SLP indexer is that it provides pre-broadcast validity checks. So you can construct your transaction, submit it to the server, and the server will look at that transaction and tell you whether or not it's valid or not. So this is important because I think the most services that exist today, they don't provide this. So if you submit a invalid SLP transaction, there's nothing to guard against burning if there's a mistake, because the full nodes, they don't typically validate SLP. But the BCHD full node, when the SLP indexer is enabled, it can protect against the accidental burning. So there's also a burn protection system. So if you want to burn tokens, and this is actually a really cool feature of SLP, is that you can burn tokens and prove that the token is burned. So you always have an accurate accounting of the circulating supply for the tokens. So if you want to burn a token, you have to explicitly tell the server which coin it is that you want to burn. And you have to provide sufficient details about that coin to prove that you know what you're doing. Like how much token am I burning, and what the UTXO ID is. The other cool thing that's innovative about this is that we provide burn flags for reporting. If a burn does happen, we'll show you exactly why the token was burned with some additional details. So I just wanted to bring up, so as part of this project, we forked an existing Explorer. So BCHD has a block explorer that Josh Ellthorpe built, and I forked that and added all of the SLP parameters to that block explorer. And so here's an example of the burn flags that are provided when we entered in this transaction ID. It tells us that this is an invalid SLP transaction. There's insufficient inputs, and it tells us why. It's because, well, there's insufficient inputs. There's some standard error messages here that are applied, but I like this Explorer. It's at slp.network because it provides a lot of details. As you can see here, the top section kind of provides general transaction information. And then it gives us the 3 input information. You can't go into any more detail than this. And then there's the outputs at the end of this. And as JT was explaining earlier, the first output for an SLP transaction always has to be a op return message in the script pub key. So here is actually the op return message. So let's move on here. So I just wanted to provide some resources. First of all, if you haven't joined the SLP Telegram group, please do that because it's a great group of people who are interested in SLP. I think pretty much everybody that is interested in SLP is in that room. We're right around 1,000 members, or maybe it's around between 700 and 800 members right now. But it's at t.me/simple ledger. Code repository for the BCHD SLP indexer. Currently, this is in beta. So it's a fork of the Gcache BCHD. We're working on getting it merged. The project should be merged into the master branch probably in a matter of weeks. But if you want to go ahead and try it out now, it's the code review has been, it's almost done, but it is available, and contact me if you need help getting it running. So here's some links to the gRPC clients that I was talking about earlier. We have Node.js, Web, Dart, and Flutter. And then we have this gRPC gateway for any applications that can't operate on gRPC HTTP2. You can still use HTTP1 through the gateway server. And if you go to bchd.ny1.simpleledger.io, there's a Swagger, which it actually shows you all of the API endpoints that are available. This is just automatically generated from that protobuf file. And I just wanted to kind of review a couple of these endpoints that are super useful. The first one here just says check SLP transaction. This is what I was talking about earlier, where you can submit your transaction to the server, and the server will tell you whether or not it would broadcast this, because it will not broadcast SLP transactions if the indexer is enabled. You can also provide the burns that you want to allow. So if you want to do a token burn that's provable, then you can specify each individual coin that you want to allow to be burned. See, there's the submit transaction endpoint. It's similar, but this one would actually submit the transaction to the blockchain. And you can skip the SLP validity check if you want to, because understand that, providing the information required to validate the burns, it can be a little tedious. So there's, a workaround here. If you just want to burn it and skip that check, that's possible as well. So when we were working on this SLP indexer, we went ahead and built a new SLP library in Golang. So there's a link to that. I've already showed you the new SLP Explorer that is powered by BCHD at slp.network. There's a link to the code here if you want to check that out. Explorers provide a really good example for how to interact with the full node, because it uses the majority of the API endpoints, so you can kind of get a really good broad view of how the code is used there. There's the PHP client library is built by Ecliptor. He did a really good job on that, and he's calling his library Cache P. And so some code examples. There's a faucet that you can use to distribute your token that you create. That uses BCHD. I upgraded that a few weeks ago. Previously, it was using SLPDB, or I think maybe it was even locally validating the tokens, which would take forever. So I have this faucet running on Heroku. It's the project set up so it's super easy to launch it on Heroku. But anyway, you would just enter in your address here and then click claim free tokens, and then your wallet will receive some free tokens. Now this site is probably out of tokens right now, so but I encourage everybody to kind of set their own faucet up and just play around with that. So there's some more code examples. There's an SLP validate library, which provides an example of how to do trusted validation, as well as downloading all the transactions to do local validation. You can do that as well. And then there's this SLP comps project. So the SLP comps is a pretty important project because it actually compares all of the indexers to each other. It makes sure that all the indexers are in agreement upon what is valid. And so we've been able to catch some issues with some of the indexer nodes by comparing validity across the different implementations this way. But it's just another good example of the apps, how to build an app using the BCHD API. So then we have some ecosystem projects. The one right now that's using this BCHD backend with the SLP indexer right now is the WordPress WooCommerce payments plugin. So if you have a WooCommerce store or a WordPress store with WooCommerce, you can actually accept payments in the form of SLP tokens by just simply installing this plugin. And then you probably want to run your own full node. It's non-custodial, so you provide the plugin with your public keys. You provide it with your full node server URL, and then you can accept payments from anybody that comes to your store with your whatever SLP token that you would like. Also, some of the other indexers or APIs in the ecosystem are considering using the pre-broadcast burn protection that BCHD offers. simply because there's those indexers usually would just broadcast a transaction straight to a full node that doesn't know anything about SLP. And those cases are kind of risky because since they don't know about SLP, you can accidentally burn it. The full node doesn't care. So just to kind of wrap up here, if people are interested in using SLP or learning about SLP, I always recommend just like get into the code. So where I would start would be going to the SLP Validate project, which is a JavaScript project. It's an NPM library, but download the GitHub code and then run these 3 examples. So you have a trustless local validation example. There's a trustless local validation with the graph search, and that's using the graph search plus that JT built. So the difference here is, trustless local validation just goes to BCHD and it downloads every single transaction that it needs to individually. If using the graph search, it downloads all the transactions as a huge batch. It just says, okay, server, here's my transaction ID. You just send me all the transactions I need, and then I'll start churning through them. And that could be a lot faster, although it's still obviously much slower than just asking a server what the validation status is, because BCHD and these other SLP indexers, they always just keep up to date with the chain tip, and they know what's valid and what's not valid. So that's the 3rd example here, just trusted validation. Ask BCHD, is this token valid or not? So the other recommended homework that I would say is set up your own SLP faucet with that project that I showed earlier. It's super easy to do. You can just put it up on Heroku, look at the code, and a lot of the code is probably similar to what you'll find in the SLP Validate examples, except it's going to be more detailed because it provides interacting with addresses and private keys, and because the server is actually automatically sending people tokens when they request them. So as a final thing here, I do have a bounty offer. So if anybody is interested, I'll give you 1 BCH if you fork the SLP faucet project and then do a pull request so you do all your work in open source. And then basically what you're going to be doing is adding the deploy to Heroku button. So if you can take this project and just transform it so that somebody can just go to the repository, click the deploy to Heroku button, and then this thing just kind of automatically gets set up on Heroku after they enter their user account. They have to enter in, you got to have your private keys, you got to have a token ID. So there's some environment variables that you need to set up, but I don't think it should be too hard. But again, 1 BCH, so that's right, probably $250 or so bucks. There's some links here on how to get started with doing a Heroku button. So anyway, that's all I have. If there's any questions, we can go ahead and take them now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James.
Sure.
Cool. I don't see any questions immediately popping up, but I had a bit of a question for, I guess, you guys generally is I'm seeing a lot of the links you're sharing are the .cache domain. Can you guys talk about that? Is that a like decentralized domain or specific to Bitcoin Cash at all?
No, it's just a general top level domain, and I don't actually know the history behind why it was created. I think probably just one of the TLDs. I don't think it represents a country like a lot of the 2-letter TLDs do. But it just became really popular with the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem when it started, just because, .cache, it's a natural fit. But it's just a regular top-level domain. And a lot of the ideas that people have had in the last couple of years with Bitcoin Cash, a good .com domain is probably taken, but the .cache was relatively... So it's just these... I think it's just coincidence, but the timing turned out to be perfect for people in the Bitcoin Cash space to embrace that like .cache top level domain.
Super cool.
James, I had a question for you just on the topic of BCHD and the timeline. It sounds like it's in final code review, and sometime in the next few weeks is expected for the SLP indexer to be officially released in the mainline. Is that correct?
So code view is wrapping up. I talked to Chris a couple days ago. He said that there's just a couple more files to review. I would expect that it would be merged, shortly after he's done with his review and everything's been addressed. But that could be in a couple weeks, or maybe he wants to wait for after the November 15th hard fork. I don't know. I can understand him wanting to maybe wait, just because you want to kind of limit the chaos at around November 15th. So we'll see what he wants to do.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I did not know. I mean, you had hinted about the burn protection, and I did not know that Bitcoin.com had implemented burn protection. I am definitely going to be looking into that. They're working on it. It's something that they're considering. It's only been a kind of a briefly discussed. So hopefully they do that. Hopefully they follow through. But it's a super useful feature. Yeah, there's other reasons why it's a good idea to isolate a node at scale when you're building a large system, to isolate a node just for sending transactions. And so I think I might end up setting up a BCHD node with burn protection to be that node.
Right. Yep, it's good backup.
Cool. We do have a couple questions here. So first one is, can you use Simple Ledger public BCHD instance for projects?
Yeah, you can start that way, definitely. But you might find that the rate limiting is too stringent for your project, so you might want to set up your own. But maybe that's not going to be an issue, so you'll have to find out, I guess.
Right. So it kind of goes back to our poll. It's always better to run your own node, but you can get things running out of the box with BCHD.
I would recommend
to a certain point.
Always when you're starting out with SLP. Always first rely on a public instance. Don't dive right into setting up your own full node, because you probably don't need it. If you build a prototype first that just relies on a public API, and then see how that goes, and if needed, spin up your own full node.
Cool.
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. And James is totally right. Like don't get bogged down with all the technical stuff. Just use a public resource. Like Fullstack.cache offers a free tier. There's plenty of public BCHD nodes. Just get started hacking and have fun first. And then once you start to take it more seriously, then one of the things I want to speak to with this concept of BCHD is that a lot of it is it's attractive because you run the node yourself. There's not really any third party that you have to depend upon, and that's very attractive, particularly for certain use cases. If you are building an app that needs to scale to thousands or hundreds of thousands of users, you need to worry about that. But it's not something you need to worry about until you really do need to worry about it. But so some of these sort of paradigms of running your own node, where does the node live? Like some of these start to get hairier, become a hairier question when you talk about scale and what do you mean when you use the word scale? Do you mean 10 users, 100 users, 100,000 users? So just keep that in mind. But yeah, BCHD is a great node, and I'm just so impressed with the work that James has done with the SLP indexing being integrated into the node.
Nice. So it's like if your project is starting off as a minnow, you don't need to throw it into the ocean. You just need a nice little pond for it to live in. Then it eats some plankton and grows a little bit bigger, and then eventually you need to bring it to a new pond. So the evolution of a project. Awesome.
Yep.
Okay. Another question here. Does the latest release of BCHD already support the SLP indexing?
No, it does not. This has not been merged in yet. It's in final code review. And actually, the repo is not in the Gcache organization. It's in the Simple Ledger Inc. organization. And I'm going to share these slides after we get off here. And all of the links and stuff are in the slides.
Cool. We'll look out for those links there. Another question. Awesome. We have a bunch of questions coming in here, actually. Okay. How much storage does BCHD need for storing all indexes? Is it similar to other full nodes?
Yeah, BCHD might be a little bit more because it also has an address index. And I think it's somewhere between 200 and 300 gigs when you're fully indexed. If you don't have any indexes, it's probably around 150 or so. But the SLP index only adds like 300 megabytes, so that's pretty cool.
Very interesting. So it's definitely like a dedicated machine in a spot, like as with most nodes, I think. Yeah, makes sense. Very cool. Okay, more questions, guys. This is awesome. With SLP indexing in BCHD, does this mean that SLP is now mined or covered by proof of work consensus? Very interesting question there.
No, SLP is just covered by its own rule set. There is no proof of work consensus, and the full node will burn SLP tokens because it doesn't really know about SLP. BCHD is a unique instance because when the SLP indexer feature is turned on with BCHD, it becomes aware of the SLP rule set and therefore can prevent the burning. Very,
very interesting. I feel like there's more nuance there. So like, so how is it like being secured from like Sybil attacks in that regard?
So the Sybil attacks, it's the same attack vector as Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash itself. You can't do spamming any more than you can do to Bitcoin Cash, right? You have to actually spend Bitcoin to make an SLP transaction. Okay, because what's happening is in an SLP transaction, the first output is just a specially formatted message. And the subsequent outputs are small Bitcoin amounts to the actual token receivers. So the first output points to those other outputs and it assigns token values to them. So you can't send tokens to somebody without actually sending a tiny amount of Bitcoin as well.
I get it. So it's still relying on like the proof of work that is happening on Bitcoin Cash. It's just like a layer on top of that allows token transfers. It makes complete sense.
Correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Let me see if I can answer that in a different way. For people, because a lot of people struggle with this idea of what the SLP tokens are. If people go to the website memo.cache, it's like a Twitter but on the blockchain, And there's very little difference between a memo.cache transaction and an SLP transaction. They're both a Bitcoin Cash transaction with an op return. And so what SLPDB or any of these indexers are doing is they're going to the blockchain, they're looking for the op return that matches a specific format. But then where the validation happens, in Bitcoin, miners are producing blocks, and that's the validation. Whatever goes into the block, that's the final truth. And but in SLPDB, you're following the DAG, or the chain of transactions, and you're evaluating each transaction for its validity based on the historic chain of related transactions. They're all connected in a DAG, and so this is where the burning occurs, is when something's not matching up with the DAG. And this is why the concept of like a trusted validator is so important. In Bitcoin Cash, you don't have that problem, because you just have a node and it's reading what the blocks produced by the miners, and that's the trust. But in SLPDB, you can actually have two different indexers that are out of sync with one another. They're looking at the same data and they're coming up with different answers. And so one can tell you that something's valid, and the other one can tell you that it's not valid. And so this is why having the indexer even closer to the node, integrated into the node, like James has done with BCHD, is so valuable. But again, this comes back around to this idea of scale, where at large scale, we're probably still going to need something like SLPDB that's just a dedicated, scalable piece of software that can handle just SLP validations. Time will tell if that's how it plays out. And one feature of SLPDB that we haven't talked about yet is this idea of whitelisting, where right now, out of the box, SLPDB tries to index every SLP token in existence. And as the space grows, I'm expecting to see more and more people make use of this white labeling feature, where you just pay attention to like the top 10 SLP tokens that your business really cares about, and then it pretty much ignores everything else. And so that's one way to scale. Obviously, that's not desirable when you are trying to set up a public infrastructure, but for businesses, I expect them to take advantage of that feature.
Cool. It's almost like having your own little business shard, where you're only managing the transactions and flow through of specific set of things. Very interesting. Cool. Let's check out some more questions here. Could you compare SLPDB versus BCHD, when to use one over the other?
I kind of preemptively answered that, but I don't know. James, do you have any thoughts, or JT?
Yeah. So SLPDB does index every single property about Bitcoin Cash, and the SLP messages for that matter. So every property in the SLP message is indexed with SLPDB. So this means that you can do more detailed and intricate queries for information that BCHD is not going to be able to give you. BCHD can give you validity information, and it can return all the transactions associated with an address. It can give you unspent transaction outputs very quickly. And it always provides the SLP validity information with those queries. Those are basic queries. But SLPDB can do much more detailed queries.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's a really important point. That I think most people are intimidated when they look at the SLP serve MongoDB query. It's very complex and tight, but what that gives you is this incredible expressivity. If you want to do things like, you can do incredibly expressive queries like, give me all the token holders with tokens between this block height and this block height, so that I can do an airdrop to like this very targeted group of people. Like just highly expressive queries can be done with SLP Servant by querying that Mongo database.
Very, very cool.
I think the most popular application for SLP is to do these airdrops and dividends to the current token holder list. So SLPDB, I think, is the only software that can query for a token holders list and give you coin age, amount, as well as all of the addresses holding that token. That's just because it uses MongoDB, and all of the properties of the Bitcoin transaction are indexed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let me expand on that, because it really, I think, brings the point home. So the Permissionless Software Foundation, this is one way in which we are trying to be a DAO, is that if our private key was ever hacked, or if someone ever internal to the organization embezzled funds, or any sort of catastrophic thing, or we burn the mini baton, that could happen. What we can do is, because all the transactions are on the blockchain, we can use SLPDB to roll back the clock and look backwards in time at any block height, and use that to airdrop a new token with a new minting baton, and just hit the reset button, and we can basically make everyone whole at any moment in time, because we can just airdrop a new token, switch all the software over to using the new token, and so this is one of the ways in which we plan to mitigate some of these catastrophic failure threats to the organization.
Cool. And you're sorry to jump in there, but you're mentioning this is a DAO, right? This is a decentralized autonomous organization. So the decision to make that kind of reset would be put to a vote of some sort?
Yeah, well, actually, anybody has the power to do it at any time, because it's all on the blockchain and it's transparent. But yeah, if there was, say, if we lost consensus, if there was a schism and a disagreement on the direction that the PSF is heading, we embrace this concept of forks of because all the software is MIT licensed and everything takes place on the blockchain. Anybody who can get a handful of people together to support, they're free to break off, airdrop a new token to all the other token holders, fork the software to work with that new token. And so it mitigates both external threats, if the government surrounded us all up and threw us in jail, any one person is free to just keep the idea of the PSF going and build on top of the software and build on top of the token. But it also mitigates internal threats, where if there's just a disagreement on the management and direction, this is how we'll ultimately resolve it if we can't resolve it with other means.
I just want to clarify that Chris is talking about his PSF token, which is his own token. It has nothing to do with SLP, as an ecosystem. SLP as an ecosystem doesn't even have a token, right?
Right.
So I just wanted to clarify that point.
Okay, I get that now. JT, I think you wanted to jump in and say something?
Yeah, but Chris actually covered exactly what I was going to say, and I just wanted to bring up the fact that it's really cool with SLP that you can actually fork tokens, and I don't think that's normally a very common thing. But there's a few projects. One of the ones that I think is pretty interesting and has had a few forks is the Mist token, which we're going to be doing a workshop on mineable tokens in the future. But yeah, that's had multiple forks, and I think they started from Genesis for each of them, but it's just as easy and incredibly inexpensive to fork from a current height and just go your own way with that too. And that's kind of a cool feature with SLP, where even the projects are, I think it might be technically possible, but financially improbable for a lot of other systems to really be able to do that, or they don't even have the infrastructure like SLPDB to make that quite easy to do. So
awesome.
I'm glad that you brought up Mist, because this is for the people who are watching this and are thinking about it from an entrepreneurial mindset. this cutting edge stuff, like Mist is definitely cutting edge, this mineable tokens. And then Pooker released an article on read.cache about sort of some ideas using Bitcoin script and SLP tokens to sort of start to explore like ideas around DeFi. And what he was exploring in that article was a way of essentially you could buy the right to mint tokens by depositing Bitcoin Cash into a smart contract, but the minting baton is only controlled by the smart contract. And it was less of like, here's how you do X, and more of like, here are some basic primitives that could form a whole range of business solutions. And I'm really intrigued by some of these cutting edge things. Like we're just really starting to see what's possible by combining smart contracts, which is Bitcoin script, and SLP tokens with the minting baton and the Genesis. Like this is the cutting edge. That's if you want to be on the cutting edge, that's it.
Very cool.
I feel like we're in a really special time with SLP because we've sort of have the infrastructure piece of validation and stuff, fixed and solved as far as scaling goes. We can now start focusing on some of these really exciting smart contracts and scripts. And over the last couple of weeks, I've had a chance to check out all of Roscoe's work with cachescript.org. I mean, that is an amazing software kit that he's put together. So I just want to say, give a shout out to him and the work that he's done on cachescript.org. It's just really impressive.
Cool. So you kind of touched on DeFi in your last statement there, Chris. We have a question from the audience regarding that. So it's talking about typically in the ETH space, in other places that are building DeFi, there's this concept of like bonding curves and values of tokens, like in pools that are valued not against like an external, maybe the dollar or the ecosystem at large, but they're valued against each other. Do you have any thoughts on that being implemented with SLP, BCH? And like how SLP might fit into that kind of ecosystem?
Well, just real quick to make sure I understand the question, can anyone give me just a quick overview of a bonding curve? I want to make sure I understand that term correctly. Yeah,
so like when you have, so on Uniswap, for example, you deposit liquidity of 2 tokens in equal measure when the pool is created off the bat, and that sets the price to each other. And then as one like puts more tokens of one in and takes out tokens of the other, it changes the ratio, which changes the price in relative to that specific token, as opposed to in general. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, that is actually exactly how the token liquidity app, which allows you to trade the PSF token, works. And that was the idea. I don't remember ever coming across that term when I was reading the Bancor white paper, but that was the idea behind the Bancor white paper. Was this? It's a smart contract with 2 tokens, and yeah, you add one and you pull out the other, and the contract keeps things in balance. And so I took that idea, and the token liquidity app that the Permissionless Software Foundation uses, it's the same idea, but it's not an on-chain smart contract. It's a JavaScript Node.js app that just lives on a server. So there's an element of trust there in that you're trusting the app's going to do what it says it's going to do, but it's really the same amount of trust as an on-chain app. It also means I can turn it off if there's a bug. That's really convenient. But yeah, that's the basic idea behind the token liquidity app. And to my knowledge, I haven't seen anybody else do this with tokens, but that's how we maintain this peg. And I have a business plan on psfoundation.cache that you can look, and there's a section in there that goes into that bonding curve and how the token is pegged loosely pegged, and then later on obtains a hard peg to Bitcoin Cash. So ways of getting started with this, that's one way to do it. That's how I solved it, because that was the only way I could figure out how to solve that problem. at the time. But this article on read.cache by Pooker that I mentioned, he's starting to go down this road of how could we encapsulate those rules into a script contract so that emission schedule could be actually on chain and could therefore be a little more trustless and a little more tamper proof.
Super awesome. So if anyone's looking to do something similar for their projects, they could take a look at that repo that you just mentioned and get some ideas on how that might work in the SLP space. Awesome. I think that exhausted all of our questions. We'll hang out for a few more seconds to see if there's any last minute questions there. But let's take a look at the poll that we had going. Last second to answer the polls, folks that are still sticking around with us. Pardon me. Did you know about stablecoins on SLP before? Almost a direct split. Slightly more to the nope side, but now it's in folks' radar, and they can go check out. Stablecoins do exist on SLP. Have you heard of Sideshiftai before? It's changing before my eyes. We have 60% that did not know about it, 40% love it. It's an awesome permissionless exchange. So for those of you that hadn't heard about it, go check it out. For the node runners, we have Node Runner. That's hilarious. We need a Wile E. Coyote for the Node Runner. So we have a 20-20-20 split on the nodes now. So if you run a node, there's 20% running Bitcoin Cash node, 20% running Bitcoin ABC, and same thing for BCHD. And still there's 40% that are interested in starting their node. So we've given you a bit of an overview on BCHD, at least today. So some food for thought for those that are looking to start running their own nodes. Highly suggest it. Can't suggest it enough. It only strengthens the network. It only gets you a little bit more interested, a little bit more involved in the global community that we're building. But I want to thank everybody that tuned in today. I want to thank Chris. I want to thank JT. And of course, I want to thank James for coming and giving us some great knowledge and some walkthroughs and amazing resources. Like we have lists and lists and lists of links for people to follow up on. And you gave some really great advice at the beginning for people that are building businesses in the blockchain space. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you for hosting.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
It's been a pleasure. So for those of you that are still here, if you haven't already signed up for blockhack.ca, it's still not too late. We are ready and waiting to help you and support you building your business. You can take a look. There's a button down just under my face here with a link to our portal. It's our resource hub, so you can find all the links that you need in order to get plugged into our community and sign up for the hackathon and make your way over to our Discord channel, where these lovely gentlemen will be there also to help you if you're specifically building on SLP or in the Bitcoin Cash space. We're there to catch you and support you the entire way. And so on that note, I will see you guys later on this evening. We have another amazing chat for you. But until then, I'll see you in Discord, and I'll see you on the next workshop. Take care, guys.